Motherhood, but not quite as we imagine. Thought-provoking, refreshing, straightforward, sometimes taboo, often seemingly ordinary, but always honest. Welcome to School for Mothers, opening conversations we all need to have, exploring ways in which you can be fulfilled as a woman, once a mother. Now here is your host, mother of 10, Danusia Melina Durbin.
Welcome back to the School for Mothers podcast. I'm your host, Danusia Melina Durbin. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode, GROWNUP. This episode is sponsored by Me Sheets, my simple but incredibly effective system to get mothers not only doing the things we want to, but as important, if not more, Me Sheets reinstall us mothers bang smack in the center of our own lives. We all know how easy it is to meet everybody else's needs, but by the end of the day, to realize that somehow we've not got to the things that we really dearly want to do. Well, that's what Me Sheets does. It helps us take ourselves from lower on our list of priorities to undeniably at the center. And if that isn't good enough, Me Sheets model to our kids that taking care of our own needs is a must. To get Me Sheets delivered right into your hands so that each day you feature in all you do, go to schoolformothers.com/Me Sheets. In fact, watch out for Me Sheets news because I'm very soon I'm going to be offering you the Me Sheets free online program, because what I've realized is that as much as the Me Sheets are doing ever so well for people, women are loving these Me Sheets, and I get lots of feedback that tells me that. But really what you need, and I know I would have loved it, I had to come up with it myself, is something that really tells you how to use Me Sheets. So I'm going to put that together. I'm finessing it as I speak, and I want you to get the very best out of using your very own Me Sheets. So more on this soon. Before we move on to the next episode, this episode Grown Up, I want to spotlight one of our listeners. This is Kieran, who wrote to M. Stroud about her episode Mask. And I want to give Kieran a great big shout out. Here's what he said. Just listen to the podcast, M. Super. Really enjoyed it. I was not aware of the banana story. I'm going to watch your TED Talk. I'm sure Danusia got loads of offers on the nun's habit, but coming from Ireland, if she didn't, I can organise one. Kieran, I am ever so grateful for you tuning in, and I am beyond happy to hear you not only enjoyed the show, but that you might actually be able to get me a wimple. Yep. A nun's habit. Have you any idea how much that will make my year? If you do, please make this happen. Listeners, if you've not listened to Mask and you have no idea why the devil I need a wimple, perhaps go and listen. It's a lifelong wish. Anyway, I know that particular piece of info there is beyond the kind of typical listener behavior. But feel free to leave a review. And, I'd love to hear if you're enjoying the podcast. And possibly you will actually be spotlight on the podcast. You can do this on iTunes or anywhere else you listen to the podcast. Come on, give us a bit more feedback. Well, actually, I'm just being greedy because we are getting a lot. And it's quite hard to decide who to spotlight, but I'd love to make it you. So you can send feedback to podcast@schoolformothers.com. Now then, let's get on with this week's episode, Grown Up. I'm joined by Cheryl Benton, who's an author, public speaker, and founder of the 3 Tomatoes. It's a digital lifestyle media platform for women who aren't kids. She's also a wife, mother of a daughter, and grandmother. That's her favourite title. She's also author of a novel called Can You See Us Now? I know that that's a very important title. And I hope that we'll be talking about that in our conversation. Her CV is, obviously impressive and details her New York City advertising agency long career as a top executive at some of the largest agencies in the world. She's recipient of the Distinguished Alumni Award from Adelphi University, and she has also been inducted into the Business Marketing Hall of Fame. She was named a top CEO by Smart CEO magazine. She's often a frequent speaker, and I've seen Cheryl speak. She speaks on marketing to women and women's global issues and is co-author of the book Leading Women, 20 Influential Women Share Their Secrets to Leadership, Business and Life. Paperback. That was a paperback in 2014. I know since then she's actually very recently published a book with her daughter as well. She leads the NYC Leadership Council for Plan International USA. And for many years, she was actively engaged with the US National Committee for United Nations Women. Whew, gosh, she's really accomplished. This is great. I'm so looking forward to this. She's an amazing woman. I'm hoping to get Cheryl's insight on how media and society limits women to realize their full potential, specifically around aging, actually. And I'd love to hear about real life examples of how women aged 50 plus are rocking it out in the world and making absolutely incredible impact. Here we go. Cheryl, before we start talking on this week's word on topic of grown up, tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Well, thanks. Well, I had spent my professional career in the advertising agency business, probably 30 years of being in the ad agency business, which was a, wonderful, wonderful time and exciting and fun until one day it wasn't. And when I left the agency business, I started a marketing consulting business, but I also felt that I had been looking around at all these wonderful women I knew in New York City, which was where I lived and worked, who were fantastic and smart and savvy and accomplished. And we were somehow starting to have these conversations like, where do we find clothes anymore that don't make us look like our teenage daughters? Or where do we find a restaurant to eat in where we can actually hear ourselves talk? And other conversations that had to do with now how they were feeling, in their careers, or women who were suddenly being laid off and couldn't, find a job anymore. So it was all these conversations about women who were over 50, 60, 70, and basically that we were starting to feel ignored, we were starting to feel marginalized, and we were starting to feel invisible. So, when you look around, and certainly having spent, so many years in advertising, the marketing industry and advertising industry certainly contributes to that. It's very hard to find yourself being depicted as a woman the way we see ourselves when we're over the age of 50, and that's still true by very large measures. And, the media isn't talking to us anymore. So I thought, you know what, it's high time that we just celebrate who we are. So just for the fun of it, I started this little newsletter. I called it The 3 Tomatoes. I sent it to 60 friends, and it just took on a life of its own. It grew from there. So apparently a lot of women, it struck a chord because a lot of women were really feeling the same way and starting to feel this sort of marginalized invisibility and saying, the heck with that. This isn't who we are. And let's celebrate this fun, amazing time of our lives together. And for me, it's been an amazing journey because the 3 Tomatoes is now a pretty substantial website. We've got 3 city-specific newsletters in the U.S. and New York City and L.A. and San Francisco. Our subscriber base is certainly all over the U.S. We even have subscribers in the U.K. and Canada and other places outside the U.S. So, so there's definitely a chord that's been struck here. And for me, the most amazing thing is that in doing this, I have met and been inspired by so many truly incredible women who are just proving that they are ageless and really can accomplish and do anything. And that's really what it's about.
Yeah, there's so much that you've just said that resonates for me in terms of what I notice in the world of invisibility and visibility for women and media and advertising. And actually, the daft question that I've got right away is why 3 tomatoes?
That's I get asked that question all the time.
I'm sure.
No, it's great. In my father's generation, in the US anyway, I don't know if this held true in the UK, but instead of saying a woman was hot, they would call her a tomato. They would say, now that's a tomato. So it was sort of a throwback to a different time and a different era. And I had these three great friends who we were always having these conversations. So hence it was the three tomatoes.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
I know, and not to my knowledge, I've never heard that in the UK. So for me, it doesn't translate, but now I understand.
Right.
Do you know, Cheryl, I've always wondered, I've been like, I wonder why that fruit? What's going on with fruit and these women? And of course, ripeness. I've been trying to work it out, and so that's great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So a tomato was she was a smart, savvy, woman who kind of knew her way around. So it was, that was the context it was used in. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was three of you. There was three of you that used to talk this through. And I want to say the word, I'm going to say bitch, but I mean it in the really nice kind of cranky, what the hell's going on kind of way. We're not done, what kind of way. That's what I'm getting at. I can imagine that disgruntled, we're being ignored kind of impetus for this.
Right.
How empowering and brave to do that. I mean, it's wonderful. So I'm curious to hear, because I don't think many people talk about it, women talk about it. What were the changes from your ad exec days to when you became a woman of a kind of certain age? And you're saying it's 50 plus. I mean, I've heard, a lot of narrative around it's 45 plus or it's 40 but what was it for you?
Yeah, well, I think women start to feel it when you're in your 40s, that there's a change, As one of my friends say, it's sort of that day you realize that the whistles have stopped, and while when you're younger, you hate it walking down the street and getting cat calls or having somebody whistle at you. And then one day you realize, that's not happening anymore. Or it's in the workplace. And, I certainly started to feel it in the ad agency business, which is a very young business. And even though I had a very, senior role in the agency, there was one point where the internet was really starting to take off. And our agency had really started to embrace it. And then suddenly, all of these 20-somethings came in who, knew how to program and do all these cool stuff. And everything was about that, to the point where it was like, well, traditional marketing is just going to go away and die. But of course, what they forgot is you can't just have cool stuff. It needs some kind of strategy and marketing behind it.
Right.
So I went through that phase. And then the last agency I worked with, when I kind of really said, I can't do this anymore. I like to describe it as the frat house. It was like I was working with it wasn't the good old boys. It was the frat house boys. And believe me, if you're a woman over 40 and you're dealing in that environment, you are definitely not invited into the frat house. And there's other women who had shared similar stories with me too. I know I'm definitely not alone in that. But the great thing is when you sort of break out of those things and you start to see your life differently, it opens up whole new worlds for you. And you look at how you can use and leverage your experience into other areas. And, certainly consulting is a great thing, because that's actually where it's a plus, because now you have wisdom. When you're a consultant, people are listening to you, right? You have wisdom there. So
totally.
Yeah. So that kind of helps. And then I think it's one of the reasons too, you see so many women over the age of 50 becoming entrepreneurs. It's one of the biggest and most successful group that's out there, starting businesses and taking all of their experience and doing something new and interesting and different with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, why would you care? I mean, it's a very, very simple question, I guess. Why would you care about catcalling and whistling? Why do you think us women care about that? Like, why does that matter to us?
I guess that's, when that happens to, it's sort of the first sign when you start to realize, oh, I guess I'm not young anymore. I guess I'm not appealing anymore. I must not have any sex appeal anymore. We buy
Cachet, kind
into
of
it.
power.
We're
Yeah.
guilty of it. It falls on us. We have to kind of rethink that. But, definitely a lot of women, start to feel that.
Well, it's a reinvention, isn't it, from the currency that we have as a young, juicy, a young kind of non-lined woman, if you like, non-wrinkled,
Right.
all those things. I'm saying some blunt words that
Yes. No.
as a woman, who isn't one of those non-lined women myself. So, it's how we judge where we sit in a hierarchy of femininity and power and currency. So I'm guessing, I know somebody told me once, Danusia, by the time you get to about 43, when you walk in a room, you're just not going to be noticeable. And when you get on a train, by the time you're 45, you're just going to be thoroughly invisible. And I remember getting to that age and thinking, okay, so here it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's been very interesting, year in, year out, watching, when's this going to happen? At what point? For me, mine has been around high heels. My sense of, because I look at older ladies, and I do mean like what I consider I don't consider 60s, even maybe 70s. I'm talking 80. So I've watched where my threshold is of what I consider an older woman to be.
Right.
I've always wondered, when do women decide to wear stretchy trousers, like elasticated waisted trousers? When do women decide never to wear high heels again? So I've had those questions for many years because, I'm fascinated by that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you're talking about age being a plus when you're in a consulting role, whereas when you're in a youthful, traditionally youthful role, it being dispensable in a way. So for me, it sounds like a reinvention of attitude and an orientation in the world is required.
Right. And it's also not buying into these stereotypes. You talk about the women who get to a certain age and they decide they won't wear high heels anymore, or, they shouldn't have long hair. I don't know where all these rules come from, but, you just need to debunk them. And sometimes I think as women, we're our own worst enemies about this because, we buy into this perception of the aging thing too. And we're the ones who can and need to change that. And I think we are, there's been some really interesting marketing surveys lately, because believe it or not, I think marketers are now starting to realize the power of the over 40, over 50 women. One, we have huge amount of discretionary income that we do buy things.
Yes.
And I just think they're starting to realize, well, perhaps, we shouldn't be ignoring you. But the fact is, there's been some interesting studies where, women, they look at the ads that are out there portraying women and they're like, that's not who we are. I don't see myself in those ads. And that's not how I see myself. I see myself as a vibrant, active, still sexy woman, but yet the images that I'm seeing are not projecting that back to me. And another interesting recent survey too, McCann Advertising actually did this massive global survey. It was called Truth in Aging. It's really fascinating results. And looking at how different trying to look at aging different from, the age number, but more of attitudinal aspects. So they actually find that people in their 70s and people in their 30s actually have much more in common than you would think. But the interesting thing is that the people who worry the most about aging and dying are people under the age of 40, and people who worry the least are over the age of 70. So, but one of the reasons, but one of the reasons that they were saying, the younger people in their 20s and 30s have these perceptions is because they don't see a lot of positive images, again, in the media marketing about the role of aging. And they particularly were talking about, we need to present women in much more positive lights. And great examples of a company doing that, for example, is L'Oreal and using Helen Mirren, and she's so fabulous, and that's how most of us want to see ourselves. And she is certainly not invisible. So
No,
it's
she isn't.
really changing, society's perception around what age looks like and what aging means.
Yeah, exactly. And what is possible when we reach certain age points, and as you say, debunking the myths about that in fact, so for instance, the idea of being sexually active as an older person, or being vibrant, or being impactful in the world, or injecting their wisdom into the world, or our wisdom into the world, when as we reach certain stages, it's so very narrow. The rules, as you call them, the rules that we've made up and we go along with, particularly women. I think there's an awful lot of women that are saying no to that. And I've recently been noticing women dressing incredibly stylishly. And when they're older, when they're not kids anymore. And I was talking to my daughter Harriet the other day, and I said, have you noticed this trend? She's like, no, not really, because she wouldn't be noticing. She's in her 20s.
Right.
And then just as I did that, we walked into a shop, a fashion house, and I just prodded her and said, look over there. And these women who must have been in their mid-70s, dressed up so stylishly, with great thought, with accessories, with just beautiful. This was not a high-end designer store. This was a very average store. And these women were so obvious to me. And I've been watching the hair, the style, the way that women are actually almost renegades against this. They're saying no and starting up businesses, as you say, at a time when previously they would not have done that.
Right.
So it's very inspirational.
Yeah, there's definitely a movement going on around this, and I could not be more thrilled, because for a long time, I've been doing the Three Tomatoes for quite a while now, and for the long time I felt like one of the lone voices out there.
Yes.
But what's my Instagram feed these days is absolutely filled with, there's a whole slew of fabulous women in their 50s and 60s who are posting these gorgeous pictures of themselves doing all kinds of fabulous things. I mean, there's a whole group of them who are out there doing it, looking wonderfully stylish the way you've just described, and really, I think, helping to debunk this, what do we look like at, X age or...
In a way, I'm wondering whether these women who are basically raising the bar on here's what aging means, how much is that putting even more pressure? Let's say there's a woman who's in her late 50s, looking tremendous, wearing clothes that are beautiful on her, that suit her. She has the confidence because she's that wisdom. She's more at peace in her body and who she is and her sexuality. And now that's become even more pressure for those reaching that age, that it's almost like the stretching of pressured femininity is become longer and longer. I wonder, what do you think?
It's a really interesting way of looking at it. I mean, I just see it as very positive, quite frankly, that we can continue to evolve and, in each state. And it doesn't mean, I guess I should go back. It's not these people who are 60 who are trying to look 30. That's a whole different thing of trying to, keep that youthful thing. What they're really doing is embracing who they are now and making the best of that and putting it out in the world to see. And that's a very different thing than trying to find the fountain of youth. And there are certainly people doing that as well. But that's not what this is about. So
exactly, I think that's what I'm getting at. The kind of holding back time, the energetics and the literal energy that goes into that is very different from what you're describing, which is embracing this era of your life and what is possible, because there's so much more possible than has been told and is spouted about. So you're really at the head of that movement of saying, in a way, this is lies. You don't need to succumb to this figure of this age, whichever number you have. You do you in whatever way that you want, rather than I'm seeing quite a lot of women attempting to be 30, 35, and they're actually 55.
Right. Yeah, and that's just kind of pathetic. Yeah, that's just sad when you see that. So it's, that's not what it's about. I think you came to our first renewal summit in New York, but we did another one last year. And the panel that was the number one rated panel, we had this group of 4 women who were all in their 80s. And we called them Ageless Tomatoes, who were awesome. They just blew everyone away. And we had some younger women there too. I mean, women in their 20s, and they were like, oh my gosh, these women were so inspiring. And these are women who are doing so many interesting things. One is a Broadway producer who had owned a successful business for years, but always loved Broadway. So gave her business to her daughter. This was probably when she was in her late 60s or something, and went to Broadway producer school. I didn't even know there was such a thing. And now she's a top Broadway producer. So her story was incredible. Talking about high heels, there's this other woman who people just can't believe her. She's 84 years old. She's still wearing her high heels, her wedge. She wears the coolest clothes. I mean, people stop her on the street and say, she just has this way of putting everything together, so incredibly stylish, and has done all kinds of amazing things over the course of her life. But she decided about 5 years ago, she wanted to take singing lessons. And she's not a great singer, but she loves getting up to perform. And on her 80th birthday, she rented a cabaret club and invited all of her friends. And she did this incredible cabaret show. And I think she changed clothes like 5 or 6 times during the course of the event. But I thought, now that's the way to have an 80th birthday. So,
my God.
Yeah, they were just terrific.
Unbelievably inspiring. Where can the listeners find any information about these 4 women and your renewal day in New York?
We actually have a video clip at our website of some of the highlights of that particular panel, because they were great. I mean, they all said they never think about age. They just don't think about it. And they get up in the morning, they're just positive and say, okay, what do I get to do today? I mean, their attitudes were just so fabulous, as opposed to, as we all know, there were people in their 30s who were old, because it's,
yes.
They're, attitudinally, they're old. And these women for sure have changed that drama. So if people go to our website, the3tomatoes.com, and search for Renewal Summit, they'll find this video, which is really, it's only about 3 minutes of it, but it's well worth watching because they're amazing. And to me, they're what it's all about, really, when we're on this topic.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm so loving our conversation. I mean, this is it. Quick question on age. What do you do about telling people your age? Do you tell them, or how do you handle that?
I honestly do not usually say my age out loud. And the only reason I don't do this is because it goes back to the perception thing.
Yes.
And it goes back to that perception thing. And whenever I do say, it's always like, oh, well, you look so good for your age. It's always like that kind of secondhand thing. So I just have decided that it doesn't really mean anything. So I just don't. If someone asks me, I will tell them, but I don't just walk around, shouting it out to the hilltops.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I resist telling people my age, and I know that people make up that I therefore must be way older than I am because I've got all these children. Like, oh, right, maybe she's in her 70s and she's looking amazing. And as part of that, I kind of want to go. No, you've got it the wrong way.
Oh.
Like, no. So
not a bad strategy.
It's really funny. It backfires. but it's because it's exactly the same as you, Cheryl. Exactly. So it's because then we culturally place and almost logistically place people in a space and time, and therefore our own contained possibilities for them. And I wish I could remember the woman's name, and I will put it in the show notes because I'll go find it, or Harriet, my wonderful business manager, will. But there's a French dominatrix, a very famous French dominatrix, who said that the benefit of not having children is that nobody can actually work out your age. Because you don't have those age markers. So it becomes a problem. For me, I tell my children to lie. I have children that look so young, and no, it's true.
Yes,
and
just don't mention your age. Right? Well, although these days, pretty much, anyone, if they really want to Google you,
they can find your company and you can find it. Yeah,
but yes, and they'll probably find it. But I'm with you. I don't think we need, and it's mostly of how people respond to you when you.
Yes, it's not actually about the number.
No, it isn't, because I don't feel old till I say my age, and someone gives me that look like, oh wow.
Wow, do you have slippers and a little bed jacket?
Yeah, really, it's amazing. How do you still get around every day?
How are you up out of your bath chair?
Yeah, exactly. So I did want to share something else with you, though, that I thought was very interesting this past week. It's about invisible.
Yes.
And to me, invisible came to me as I got in my 40s and looked around and started thinking, women start to feel this. But last week I had a chance it was a Facebook group, and they offered a couple of people with relatively new books to have a chance to give their book away. So I put my book up there, and the way to enter the contest was you had to answer a question. So my question was, have you ever felt invisible? And what was fascinating was the responses I get back. I would say at least half of them were mothers with young children who said, yes, I feel invisible all the time as a mom with kids. And I hadn't really thought about that, but of course it makes perfect sense.
Yep.
There was another woman who said, yes, I'm very overweight and people ignore me all the time and don't talk to me and I feel invisible. Another woman talked about it in terms of, older, going places with her mother, who is very vibrant and has led a great life. And they'll be in a conversation and no one ever talks to the older person. And that's very true. If you look around, that's kind of pretty sad. If you're in a group of people and there is someone who is elderly, they are usually left out of the conversation. But I just thought that word really strikes a chord with people in so many different ways. And I hadn't thought of it in all of those different ways. So I'm just sharing that little thought.
Yeah. It's wonderful because you're absolutely right. School for Mothers, for instance, around the mother piece, women grow invisible, kind of in the submerging of what is required or what society says is required in mothering, in doing the act of mothering others, of serving and raising. And so the erosion of self is endemic. I mean, it's partly why School for Mothers was set up, why I did it, because women are crying out to be visible to themselves and visible in society. Yes. So that's it. Yeah, totally. And then, I mean, there are so many kinds of invisibilities, so many. So that is fascinating. Tell us about your book anyway, because I want to hear.
Well, thank you. So the book is called Can You See Us Now, which is a novel that's based around all of these conversations. Originally, I was going to do a book that was nonfiction, that was, but it's been done so many times, but it was going to talk about, how we feel as we grow older and blah, 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 blah. And I just couldn't get myself feeling really excited about it. And then I was like, well, why not tell the story in a more engaging, entertaining way and do it as a novel? So it's the three characters are Susie, Trish, and Madge. and they live in New York City. They all met when they were in their 20s because they were all interns at a big ad agency. And
It's sounding familiar.
Yeah, Susie stayed in the agency business. Madge went into TV journalism, and Trish was, as a serious art person, art collector, and owns an art gallery. And they're kind of sitting on top of the world till they start to turn 50. And things start to change. So Susie's in the ad agency business, and she's working for what she calls her 12-year-old boss, who completely, dismisses any thought that she has, as, being, not being with it. Madge has a much younger rival coming after her for her job on the network, and Trish is betrayed by her husband. So it starts to go on through there. So, they have a lot of upheaval in their lives, but they're also surrounded by a great group of women who they know, who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond, who inspire them. And they go on to actually create something called the Three Tomatoes. And you'll now know that it's definitely fiction because it becomes hugely successful. But its whole mission is, getting women to celebrate. But throughout it, there's love, romance, betrayal, suspense. And it still kind of gets this message across that, that we do count, don't count us out. We have a lot to offer at every age and every phase of our lives. So
it sounds absolutely wonderful, and I'm looking forward to reading it. I really am. It sounds
good.
A very rich read and enormous fun. So tell me, how did you go from nonfiction to fiction? Had you had experience? Because that seems like a big, bold leap.
Well, I have to tell you, it was the weirdest thing. No, and I've never written fiction. I've always written over things over my life, whether it was business proposals or whatnot, or writing at the Three Tomatoes.
Very different, though.
Yeah, it's really different. And one day I was sitting on the train heading back from New York City to Long Island, and these two sentences came to mind. I was kind of thinking about a book, and those became the first two sentences in the book. And I knew I wanted these three characters. I sat down, and honestly, I had no idea where this book was going to go. I had a general sense of it, but every time I sat down at my computer, this is the only way I can describe it. It was the characters took on a life of their own, and they overtook me and told the story. And I actually wrote it over last summer. And as I said, I've never written a book before, and it just was an amazing process. So that's how it happened.
It sounds like a really sacred download, actually, like this was sitting, waiting to come to life.
Yes. And when it was so influenced by, as I said, I the best thing that happened to me with the Three Tomatoes. Well, I like to say to people, when I worked in the advertising industry for so many years, all of my friends were in the ad agency business. So it's like when you live and work in the circus, you only know people in the circus. So all my friends were in that ad agency circus when I left and I started consulting. But really, when I started the Three Tomatoes and started to just meet people I never would have met in that circle. I mean, it just broadened and opened up my world. So all of these women and stories, and, and I'm a pretty good listener. You're right. They're all there someplace, and many of them found their way into this book. So it's really the stories of so many women who I know, even though it's fictional, loosely based on some people. But yeah, I think you're right. The story was there, and it just took sitting down and letting the story come forward to tell itself.
Yeah, and absolute genius to bring such your experience, not only in terms of, it feels like there's a little memoir-y piece in there, but also to crystallize kind of your experiences with the Three Tomatoes and all of the women that you're circulating around and being with and learning about their lives and their experiences into a fictional piece. I truly believe that is a very genius move of yours, rather than walking through that, just a well-worn, well-trodden road of a kind of self-helpy type
Right.
book that could also be, there's a word that sometimes comes up around older women, and I'm sure there's a number of words, by the way, I qualify that, but the one that comes up is sometimes bitter.
Right.
Like, well, these women who are older, just because they can't X or, they're not getting the attention, or there's younger women. And, I've been in the company of, your members. You mentioned about the Renewal Summit, and bitterness was never there. It's anything but. It's buoyant and effervescent and remarkable women, absolutely extraordinary women. So I think that in itself, your choice to write fiction is very, very, very smart, because that kind of erases that level, the thing that could be leveled against you about bitterness. I'm going on about it because it feels like such a clever thing to do.
Yeah.
It really does.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, it really does. And I have a question about those 2 sentences. What are those 2 sentences that you got in the train?
It's the opening lines of my book now, and it's like it was, a hot and humid August day, and Susie was glad that she had stopped inside the air-conditioned bar at Balthasar, waiting for her 3 best friends to arrive for their monthly martini meetup. Now, that was the original sentence. I think it's changed a little bit when I wrote it in the book, but that was the start of it, of waiting for friends. And that was actually the first time I think that my friends and I felt invisible. It really kind of started in that kind of scenario where we all looked great. It was in the summer. We went to some trendy bar. We had ordered a drink, and then the bartender got totally distracted with some beautiful young model sitting at the end of the bar, which is actually what happens in the first chapter of the book, and completely ignored us as we were trying to order a second drink. And we sort of looked at each other and said, well, we've just become invisible. And that's really the first chapter. That's really how the first chapter starts off in the book, too.
Wow. It sounds racy. It sounds pacey and racy, and I like it. It sounds wonderful.
Good.
As a counter to the whole conversation about invisibility and women becoming invisible, on the 2017 100 most powerful women in the world list, I was looking through this. And actually, at the time, I was looking through this to see how many of those bios, and I literally read from 0 to 1 to 100, how many of those were mothers or are mothers, and how many, that were saying they were mothers in their bio. So I read all of them, and then it hit me. I went right the way through, and 98 of them were 50 plus. 98 of the most powerful women in the world. I mean, for me, that was yes. Huge yes. And also testament to so much, because when we're mothers, our energy is disparate. It's incredibly disparate. It's certainly from where I sit with so many kids, it's a daily challenge to really immerse into anything for very long. Whether that's writing my book, whether that's running my consultancy, whatever it is, it's always present to run many parallel energetic focus, it just is. And I'm making up, because I am making up, and I'm hoping you'll tell me where I'm wrong, in later life. And most of the women were mid-50s to, in their 60s. We're talking mega corporate women, politicians. It wasn't just corporate life. It really was the most powerful women. But I was making up that, that's the era when children have grown. And of course, we've got to remember then there's elders. So I do get that.
Right.
To look after. But why do you think that most powerful list is littered with almost 100% of women 50 plus? What's that about?
I mean, I think when you start to get into your 50s and beyond, it's truly the best time of your life. It absolutely is, because there's a freedom that comes with that. And so many things change in a positive way. For example, you're typically less concerned with what other people think about you. or what you should be doing or not be doing. And it's, you become more selfish for you because you can now, a lot of the responsibilities that you've had when you're younger, whether it's raising kids or stuff may not be there anymore. And I think we become much more creative. I have seen that with so many amazing women that I meet and talk to through the Three Tomatoes. And they're exploring and doing things that, they maybe had thought about when they were younger, much younger, maybe a dream they had as a kid or a teenager, and they're now wanting to explore those opportunities. So whether it's this 82-year-old who decided she wanted to become a singer, at the age of 78, or me writing my novel for the first time, or another woman I know who just wrote a screenplay. And I'm just seeing this manifest itself in so many ways, because I think we have the opportunity as we get older to really explore all the pieces of us in a way that we don't have when we're younger. And we don't have as many pressures on us in so many ways. And it's very freeing, and it opens us up to doing all kinds of great things.
So the upside to running in the invisibility radar, so it's kind of a parallel universe. If the visibility radar for being a woman is where you have these sets of rules that you have to be doing, you have to follow, but the invisibility one sounds like you can make it up yourself, create your own path, expand in whatever ways, because you don't care so much about what others think anymore, because you're not. So does that sound like, it sounds incredibly freeing?
It is, and that's a message I hope we try to give to people through the Three Tomatoes and every the events and things that we do, because we've all seen women who give up for one reason or another. I mean, one of the toughest things, and I know you've seen many women like this who have gotten laid off from careers that they've always had, and they're in their 50s. It's almost impossible, sad to say, to get back into many of those careers. And they don't know what to do. It's like that has been their identity for most of their lives, that they don't know what to do or where to go with that. And sometimes women will just give up instead of looking and saying, okay, now what could I do with all of these things that I do know or learn, or maybe some other thing that I've been passionate about. And when women do make that leap, that's why I think you see so many women who do become entrepreneurs over 50, are, creating businesses or creating services that, they're seeing a need for, and becoming very successful at doing that.
Yeah. And also there are those women that I see, not just the ones who are in their 50s, who their professional career for one reason or another isn't, either they can't continue or they, something happens. But I also see women in their 50s, particularly, who have traded on their looks for most of their adult life. And that has been their primary currency. It hasn't been perhaps their skills or their brain power. And for some time, I know in my own life, I made a conscious decision that my brain is where it's at, no matter what, because my looks have never been the big thing from where I sit. And so therefore, that's what I must nurture, and really, it's my currency rather than our looks, because our looks will always fade.
Yeah.
Always. They'll change, they'll morph. Whereas our brain power, if we're very lucky, and our creativity lives and it thrives, and it can be expansive. And so that's, for me, that's where I'm looking. And I actually have been for years, not, well before kind of 45, because I've seen this in other women. And I don't personally want to be sat thinking, my God, what have I got going on for myself? Now my breasts are changing, and now my face has lines, and Whereas for men, of course, their currency is upscaled, is deepened and more valuable the older they get. As we literally in our language, isn't it? We have, distinguished men.
Yes.
Whereas,
Yes.
whereas we don't, we don't say that about women.
No,
not the distinguished kind of, but
don't.
Wow, what a lived-in look she has.
Right.
So yeah.
How great is that?
It's crazy. It's crazy. And I thank the universe for the work that you're doing in the world and for your book. And as I say, I can't wait to read it. I apologize I haven't before even talking to you, but it's the truth. And it's partly because I've got so many kids.
I have a lot going on.
I know you'll forgive me.
I have to read it all, but...
Yes, but most people on a podcast are like, yeah, and I read the book, and it was like, no, I'm just going to tell you I haven't, and I will, and I will definitely. But, yeah. So what is your grown daughter? Actually, I've met your daughter. Do you have other children?
Yes, you have. I just have her, but she blessed me with 3 grandchildren, which is fabulous.
Yeah, I think I met one of your grandchildren, actually.
You might have, and that's another great joy of getting older, and everyone will tell you that, who's a grandparent. That's my favorite title in the world is grandma, so, that's just the best.
And I know she's very involved, isn't she, with 3 Tomatoes?
She is when she has time. She's
yes.
An executive in advertising too. But she was really one of the key people early on, and still plays a major role in where we're going and thinking and that direction. So that's been very helpful. Very helpful.
So help listeners find you. Tell us where we can catch you. Where can we listen more to you? And repeat the title of your book so that we can all go buy it and read it.
Oh, that's great. So the website is the3tomatoes.com, and the 3 is spelled out. And we have newsletters, almost daily newsletters, most of which apply, we have the city-specific ones, but you can just sign up for the lifestyle newsletter, which covers everything from style, travel, fashion. We do a lot of health and wellness pieces on that, and you can subscribe to the newsletter, and there's no cost to subscribe. And you'll find we have just a wealth of information there. And the book is called Can You See Us Now by Cheryl Benton, and it's available on Amazon.
I love the title. It's so clever. And it says it all.
I don't know if you've seen the cover, but the cover is pretty catchy and kind of says it all too. So
yeah, it's wonderful. And that title says everything. So it's a total dream and such a pleasure that we've had this conversation. Thank you so much for opening up the world of, perspectives on older women, grown-up women, and women who are not kids any longer. And I'm really thankful. And I know this is going to open a lot up for listeners. So thank you. Lots of love.
Thank you so much. And all best to you with School for Mothers. I love it. It's a great, great concept.
Well, okay, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. This episode was extra fun for me because I'm really passionate about this topic. I think you've probably guessed. Being judged and limited by age, whether you're thought too young or you thought too old. I mean, which one of us hasn't been here? Maybe you haven't. Love to hear. I hope you loved hearing Cheryl's story as much as I have. I really do. It's really rich and insightful. She's such an epic inspiration. She's a go-getter, a risk-taker, and someone that just keeps her eye on the prize that matters to her. That's important, isn't it? I really admire that. So before we go, next week's episode, called Domino, is with all-around superstar Joe Love, and we'll be chatting over the double whammy navigation of mum perfectionism with mental health struggles triggered by maternity. Thank goodness more and more women are actually stepping forward to tell the truth about the inside job of motherhood. I really hope you'll tune in to hear Jo and I've no doubt we'll have a corker of an episode. I can't wait to connect with you again. Same time, same place next week. Have a great week. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to the School for Mothers podcast. To continue the conversation and keep your dose of inspiration up, head over to schoolformothers.com/podcast, where you'll find bonus content from Danusia and a guest on habits, recommendations, books, best apps, time-saving secrets, life hacks, health, sleep and anything in between. That's schoolformothers.com/podcast.